Hey everyone, this is the Halifax Real Estate Podcast. My name is Jason Paul and I'm a licensed realtor at Keller Williams Select Realty in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm here to help you gain a better understanding of real estate in Halifax and introduce you to a wide variety of people that work in or with our industry as well. Cameron Catsburg is here from HINAS Properties, where he and his fiancé, Kaileigh, Berg, are real estate investors who have built a portfolio of 3 B.R.R.R.R properties in Nova Scotia over the past 2 years. Cameron is here today to deep dive into their experience implementing the B.R.R.R.R strategy in Halifax, hoping that some of our listeners can take some inspiration from the strategy and implement it themselves. Please welcome Cameron Catsburg. Hey Cameron, how are you?
Not too bad, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for your patience and coordination here. It's taking a couple tries.
Listen, man, for a good value guest like yourself, I'm always happy to make it work. I guess I'll get right into it, man. The reason I have you on today is because you're one of the few people I know that has successfully pulled B.R.R.R.R off in Halifax. You're on your second or third B.R.R.R.R right now.
Second sort of official B.R.R.R, but we're going to turn the third one into it as well, I think.
Okay, amazing. So when it came to B.R.R.R, for those of you that don't know, the B.R.R.R investment strategy is buy, renovate, refinance, rent, repeat, right? What you do with B.R.R.R is it's technically called forcing the equity into a home. So you buy the lowest value home on the street, look at the comps on the street. If you buy for $200,000 and the comps read, $300,000, by up doing a kitchen, a bathroom, you can force the equity into your home, call your bank for a refinance. They'll send out an appraiser. They'll give you the new value. You can pull that money up to 80% of the value of the new appraisal out in cash. There's no capital gains. You can take that cash, pump it into the next home, and then you rent out the property so that it's cash flowing. B.R.R.R. So Cam, I guess my first question is like
stealing all my thunder.
I know, right? I want to give context.
No, I appreciate it.
That way we can actually talk about the finer details of what you've done, right?
No,
that
exactly.
way we don't have to stop at every point and say, this is what this means, this is how this works. So we'll get right into it. How did you find out about B.R.R.R?
We found out about B.R.R.R through sort of more of a happy accident through our house hacking journey.
Okay.
So we sort of started off, and I guess just from a 30,000 foot view, B.R.R.R, I really see it as sort of a short-term value maximization play.
Okay.
To try and really leverage and scale quickly. It really works for that. Like you said, you want to buy the cheap house on the block that you can put some work into, whether that's a new kitchen, that's a new roof, name it. You then do that, put that labor in, add that value, and then instead of selling it back like a traditional flip on the market, you retain that, rent it out, and you refinance it to pull the value out.
Yeah. Which
the strategy plays very well to go put that into the next one, hence the repeat, and do it over and over again.
To scale quickly.
To scale.
And accumulate houses. Because as long as you leave the rental capacity and you're making money off the rentals, you can scale with the cash flow off the rentals, and then the cash flow when you refinance, you can use in more houses equals more money. There is more accessibility to passive wealth and passive income, which is what everyone wants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You spend all this time building this little business, this rental business, which you just made nice and to your liking that somebody else would want to buy. You don't need to sell it right away. You can continue to recoup that value every single month through your rental checks.
And it's crazy. I love that strategy.
And that's really how we got into the B.R.R.R piece was we started off by house hacking. In my old job as a consultant, I was traveling every week, Monday through Thursday. And there was an opportunity for me to move in with my girlfriend at the time, now my fiance, to move in with her on weekends and sort of house hack our rent a little bit and help snowball some savings. And we kind of eventually continued that strategy, got our own place, rented out our guest room furnished to a very close friend as well. And that's when we realized, oh my gosh, this rental thing can really take off.
Yeah.
And I had sort of grown up, my parents had some rentals.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a very foreign concept to me, but when we actually felt that difference in our bank account, it became a no-brainer for us to go and attack what eventually became sort of a B.R.R.R play.
Yeah. So for those of the listeners that don't know, what is house hacking?
House hacking is really looking at, the way I see it is, for most people, their living, whether that's rent or mortgage, is one of their biggest cost buckets in their day-to-day life. So house hacking is just really getting creative with how you can help finance that bucket. And it comes often in the form of, flexibility in life. Am I okay to give up my spare bedroom and have a friend live in my space? I have a friend who's cleverly Airbnb'd his spot, and he says, how much money am I willing to move out of my house for a night
Yeah.
and be inconvenienced. So he Airbnbs his place for that, and every once in a while we'll get a stay that's a good windfall of a couple $100.
Yep.
And the idea is that every little bit really helps.
Of course.
And so that's how we got sort of our savings account growing on a more accelerated basis than sort of through our weekly paychecks or bi-weekly.
Yeah. So you have your standard income, and then you house hack by having someone move into the basement that maybe you refinished. They're paying off a portion of your mortgage, maybe the whole thing, depending on what the rent is. Then that gives you more capital to put more money into your real estate portfolio.
Exactly.
Right.
And it takes a diligence and a discipline to really, not take that money and say, oh, we're going to go splurge and upgrade this or go that. No, it's, keeping it rigid and knowing what that next big milestone is.
Yeah.
And saving towards that.
Okay. So going back to B.R.R.R.R, your first B.R.R.R.R, right? How did you recognize the first house was an opportunity for B.R.R.R.R? Did you go in thinking it was B.R.R.R.R, or did you like the house and just stumble onto B.R.R.R.R afterwards?
So we had no idea what B.R.R.R.R was at the time.
Okay.
Like it was, I think I found out what B.R.R.R.R was this June, just as I was researching the second one. We went into it and said, hey, we've been working really, really hard in Toronto, saving up. The market kept getting further away from us, and we realized, it was a condo in Toronto, or we could do, I think you had a podcast on it earlier, moving to Halifax. So we did that play, and that really sort of gave us the opportunity to buy a much bigger space.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted to do a rental. We never would have been able to afford that in the Toronto market. So we were looking for rentals, and then this one that we saw, had really good bones. A lot of the places we were looking at were older.
Yep.
This one was built in about 15, 20 years ago. I think it was 2003.
Okay.
It was ICF, which is, really good insulating.
Yep.
Very sturdy. So we knew that, we wouldn't be having all these skeletons if we started doing work on it.
Yeah.
But the unit also hadn't been renovated since the original owners built it. So it was very sort of dated by what you would, see. And when we were looking around the North End, which is where, I never really thought about living there, but my fiance from Toronto loved it. And we were seeing all these sort of smaller apartment buildings and condos go up, and thought, that's a nice thing. This area is going to gentrify a little bit.
Yep.
And we said, we're going to move in here and renovate our place to sort of compete with that. And that was the sort of the finishings we wanted to live in. So we said we would take on a full kitchen, full bathroom, redo the floors, redo the paint, and really, modernize the space.
Yep.
Because we wanted to live in there for the next sort of 3 to 5 years. But we also had faith that it would be a competitive rental long term.
Okay, so you weren't planning on burring it in terms of pulling the money out through the refinance, but you basically saw the bones. You basically saw it as house, good bones, need some updating. We'll take on the renovations, and then we'll be able to get more for the rental. So you were house hacking.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other big factor as well was the seller we had learned was actually selling 2 of the duplexes we looked at.
Okay.
Both on the same street, and we learned that they wanted to sell one of them, and they were going to live in the other. So we found a motivated seller.
Yep.
Motivation is key in negotiations, and I think real estate's a really big game of making your money on the front end of a deal.
Yep.
Find a distressed opportunity, or people with a problem, solve that problem, and sort of be remunerated from it.
Yep.
So we said, okay, well, here's a motivated seller, and we ended up buying it, I think, $40,000 under ask.
Love it.
So that was another big play for us, was that made sort of the margins a little.
What year?
Sweeter. 2018. So
okay,
yeah.
So before the big boom.
Yeah, November 2018.
Nice. Okay, so you recognize when you say the front end of a deal in terms of getting your biggest profit, that is the negotiation of the purchase price, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So you negotiate this down $40,000. You now are going to do renovations, which when most first-time investors take on a property, the most overwhelming thing I find is the renovations, because once you tear back a wall, you don't know what's behind a wall. How did you and your fiance or girlfriend at the time attack the renovation aspect of this strategy?
I think we were, again, a bit of a happy accident. And in hindsight, I'm really glad that we did do this, but perhaps a bit more naive than I'd like to admit. We had faith in the good bones in the property, but we were novice. We were just doing a kitchen and a bathroom reno. But the good folks at IKEA have really chipper smiles and a can-do attitude. So we were there for the kitchen event, and we got the sort of in-house design, which was awesome, because what I would have done in my head would have worked, but it was not nearly as an efficient use of the space.
Okay.
So we had their crew come out,
So you brought out the IKEA crew.
And they kind of gave us a firm quote with IKEA. They're on time, on budget, sort of guarantees, no surprises. If surprises come up, then obviously they
take care of it
before you dive in.
Okay.
But we had a little bit more certainty on the risk there, so we said we'll dive in there, and then with the bathroom, sort of put the call out to some friends on Facebook who could tile, and took on, that was a bit more of a smaller project, and that was one that I said we can pull some various services together and get this one complete.
Okay. But
the beauty of doing a BR while house hacking is you don't have the pressure of the timelines of sort of an empty rental and vacancies. We're just flexible with our life and saying, okay, we can sort of work around these boxes, or that's not done, but in 2 months it will be, and that'll be great.
Yeah.
So it took that whole pressure off, and also the costs associated with those vacancies.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to bring it back though to IKEA, because there's probably a lot of people listening who are thinking, holy crap, IKEA can come in, quote me, do the job, and I don't have to do anything. Right? Is that how it was, or how was it actually work? How did it actually work when you hired IKEA to come put in a new kitchen?
Yeah, and this is where sort of the naivety comment I made kicks in. Is that's exactly what I thought in my head was what you'd expected had said, but it's not as scary as you think either. They had sent in sort of a subcontractor, with a project manager who came in and led the design, had all of the sub-services that were required, did all the scheduling of them. So it was really, for me, a seamless process of just dealing with the project manager.
Yeah.
And they made sure that, if you needed permits, I'm sure they would do that. If you say took a wall out, we didn't have to do that. But they make it a very easy experience for you.
Okay. How much did that cost? New kitchen plus IKEA, all materials, labor, property manager. What was that price for you to do that renovation?
The whole thing would have come out to about $20,000 to $22,000.
That's not bad for a whole team assembling a kitchen.
And we got sort of the nice ones where the drawers pull out on all the pantry, and they silently close and stuff like that, like a nice kitchen. Yep. And for me, predictability is key. I sort of, in my day-to-day job, I do a lot of project management, and I'm very much
numbers
say
guy.
What you're going to do, and then do what you say. And if something changes, apprise everybody of it as soon as possible, so you can stick handle around the problem.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm willing to sort of pay that. The numbers worked with the quote that they gave us. I'm sure we could have gotten it done more affordably, but the numbers worked, and I was okay with that. And they delivered what they said that they would do on budget and on time.
Love it. Okay. So you've bought the house, you've done the renovations, you're going to rent now. How was it to find the tenant?
Oh, it was super easy. We were our own tenant, so the first one. So for us,
see, you approved yourselves.
Exactly, we approved ourselves. So we didn't end up having to do that sort of rent after the refurbishing just yet.
Okay.
There was tenants sort of in the rest of the house. So the other 2-floor had a big unit with a family living in there that had been there for, I think, 8 years.
Okay, I think we need to clarify this. The first house you bought, was it a duplex, single family, or a triplex? Duplex. Okay, just want to make sure, because we didn't clarify that at the beginning.
And so we just kept that, and we ended up moving into the 1-floor unit, and that's what we've renovated into sort of a really nice 3-bedroom, very spacious, and sort of higher end finishes. But the unit that they were in was actually nicer as well.
Okay.
So we sort of it worked out there, and they are still our tenants. We've since now moved out of that, so we've had to find tenants. And that was also really easy. We actually found that there was a lot more demand for a furnished unit.
Okay.
Most people were asking if we'd be willing to sort of rent with the furniture and the photos. So we ended up recognizing that as an opportunity, and then figured out how to get ourselves a bunch of new furniture on a budget.
Okay, so when you went to go hunt for tenants after you guys had left, there was a demand for furnished space. Were you comfortable giving your putting furniture in a space for a stranger to come live in? Because not a lot of people are going to feel comfortable trusting an individual to live in their space and treat their furniture a certain way. How was that okay for you guys? Just because of the numbers made the most sense, and you could get more for the rental, or was it the same price as the old rental without the furnishing?
The numbers made sense. We were getting about an extra $200 a month.
Okay, so $2,400 a year.
And we had a few items that we had wanted to sort of upgrade ourselves.
Okay.
And then Facebook Marketplace is a dream. Some days I joke that I might never go to a store again. But there was that, but also the people who were approaching us who were asking for the rentals, we were asking for a rent, I think, that was higher than maybe the market was willing to support, but not when you factored in furniture. And so we were getting people who needed to come to Halifax on sort of a 3-month or a 6-month engagement, be it for work or for school, who didn't have furniture belongings with them, that this space was actually very
accommodating
to, and it was unique too. There wasn't a lot of availability. So we just doubled down on that and said, well, we'll fix that problem, I guess.
Perfect. Okay. So you've done the first 3 steps: buy, renovate, rent. Coming into the next one, refinance. You said you didn't. You said when you bought the house, you weren't aware of B.R.R.R.R. How did you become aware of B.R.R.R.R.?
Yeah, we were buying this, and it's sorry, I might go on another tangent here.
Go on.
But I think it's really important when you're going into a house purchase that you really think about your strategy with the exit strategy of the house, and whether that's the exit strategy of selling the asset or keeping it, or just your time in that asset. And for us, we thought we were going to be in the property for about 3 to 5 years, or until a stroller became too much of a pain to carry up 3 flights of stairs. And so we saw this as our transition home.
Yeah.
And we wanted to keep it as a rental forever. So we didn't really ever think like, oh, we could sell this. That we love HGTV and all those flipping shows. We never really thought about flipping it, because we just put all this effort in to build this little rental business. The last thing I want to do is sort of sell that when it's now finally turning me monthly cash flows. So it actually took a real estate friend came over. He was a realtor, and he asked, if we'd ever be interested in selling it. We were like, no, of course not. And he said, well, have you thought about refinancing? I was like, sorry, what words? And he sort of told me about it, and again, felt a little bit naive, but a good happy accident. And I think I called the bank the next day, and within 3 or 4 weeks, we bought the second place.
Okay, you heard about B.R.R.R.R. Realtor told you to do this. You called the bank the next day, and we're working on that.
Yeah. So at the same time, this was right around rates had just sort of fallen down through the floor quite a bit, and we never really stopped looking on Viewpoint. It's a good hobby of ours.
It's everyone's hobby, I swear.
Exactly. So when he said, yeah, you can refinance, I called the bank, and fortunately our broker was like, yeah, this is why we did that, smart step thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, now it's all coming back to me. Thanks for calling me 6 months ago. And he was like, yeah, we'll have this set up. And I think the paperwork was sort of done that week. And we, that week, put an offer in on another spot. So it was sort of the timing all worked out really well. And we're pretty decisive when we see a good opportunity. So pulled the trigger, and it happened pretty quick.
So you just rolled. So you finished buy, renovate, rent, and then you just rolled right into refinance, repeat.
Yeah.
Okay. So you done the refinance. How was the process of working with the bank on the refinance? How long did it take? Were there any problems with the appraiser? How did it work with the appraiser? How did that process work for you?
So for us, the mortgage product that we had got was sort of the step product. It's a total equity plan from Scotia.
Purchase plus improvements.
Yeah, so it's pretty much, I don't know if the term's right, but like a revolving credit facility. It's a HELOC.
Yeah.
That once you get that appraiser done, then you basically have a HELOC that you can tap into.
HELOC is what?
A home equity line of credit.
Thank you.
So it's a line of credit versus sort of an unsecured one.
Yeah.
It's actually secured against the value of the asset.
Exactly.
So the way the bank does that is they'll send an appraiser out to go do an assessment of fair market value. And they then come back, and the bank is willing to loan you up to 80% of the value of that property.
Asset. Yeah.
And so the difference between that 80% and how much you have left on your mortgage is effectively the free equity that you have to be able to put towards this HELOC.
Okay.
And you can use the HELOC not necessarily for another rental property. You could use it to invest in sort of, the stock market. You could use it for cash to do a renovation on your home, whatever you sort of want to do, but you are borrowing, and there is a cost to borrow.
You can also buy a boat.
Exactly.
You don't have to invest.
But with the B.R.R.R.R. strategy, and this is where I think, discipline is really important.
Yep.
Is that money goes right into the repeat. And that last R is the most important one, because like I said, this is about a short-term value maximizing, highly leveraged play to scale quickly.
Yes.
And sorry, that's a lot of words, but
no, it makes sense.
You gotta get there. You gotta put it back in to get that snowball rolling. And it was cool to hear Tyler talk about it. Now he's up in a 28 unit
28
building,
units. You might.
the snowball can roll pretty quickly when you're disciplined.
We're a few months past when Tyler purchased the 28. He's probably got something else now. I wouldn't be surprised.
Shout out Tyler.
All right, shout out Tyler.
It was a great podcast.
Okay, so you've done the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. That's great. I love the implementation of the strategy. What were the hard numbers for those people sitting at home being like, how could I do this? What are the actual talking down payment to get in the house, renovation budget, and what was the refi, and all those numbers coming together? What did it look like to you?
Okay, so and I think we sometimes approach the calculation backwards, so I'll go both ways. We purchased the house for $555,000.
Yep.
We had actually a purchase plus improvements mortgage. I'll get into that a little later. That gave us $60,000 worth of upgrades into the house. And we put an additional $20,000. There were some surprises that came up with the heating system. So that's about like $635,000 of sort of cash value on the home. Now, for us to do the purchase plus improvements mortgage, we had to put 20% down. So we put about $110,000 down and the $450 some odd on the mortgage. And then we also had to put 20% down for the purchase plus improvements amount. So in total, that's about $125,000 for us that we put as a down payment.
Yep.
With about $500,000 give or take in sort of debt. We then ended up getting the property appraised in 2020 for $815,000.
Okay.
So the $815,000 times the 80%, because that's what the bank will loan you, is about $650,000 is like the equity value.
Yep.
And then over those 2 years, we've been paying down the principal of the mortgage as well. So our debt was at $480,000.
Okay.
The $650,000 minus the $480,000 gave us about $175,000 to go put towards
the next house.
The repeats.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So now you mentioned something there that I want to touch on, and it's renovations and unexpected costs. So you did the kitchens, you did the bathrooms, you built up the nicer parts of the home for rental. You mentioned furnace was unexpected, or the heating was unexpected. What was unexpected, and why did you have to spend that extra $20,000 that you did not budget for?
So it was an oil. The heating in the home was radiant in floor, and it was heated oil based, and the oil tank we knew needed to be replaced.
Yeah.
Scotia Fuels they were servicing the home, and they said, yeah, this is fine for another year or two. And then I purchased the home in Scotia Fuels, and I realized that the tank was uninsurable, and that Scotia Fuels does the maintenance, and maybe, do a double check next time instead of just taking that one. But then we realized, and so it was really insurance driven. They wouldn't insure without a new oil tank. And then the way that, I don't know exactly the history of if the code's changed or something, but nobody would install, because of code reasons, an oil tank in its existing position.
Okay.
So we then had to go to a different system, and we chose to go with propane.
Okay.
For our building, it was one of the more efficient modes to heat. And for us, we knew we wanted to replace the heating system and add that value in. We didn't know that it was going to come out on the refinance, but it ended up playing out really well.
Love it.
But we took the approach of we will leverage now and fix the problems today to have that high-end rental and a seamless experience for the next few years. This is something we do side of desk. We've got very heavy day jobs. So having the headaches of, a furnace blowing or this, that I just can't, I don't have the flexibility in my life to deal with that. And I didn't want to pay a property manager. So we said, if we're going to have to do it in 2 years, let's just do it right off the bat.
Yeah.
So it was a bit unexpected, but we made it happen, stick handle around it.
I love did you play hockey?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah,
but not very good.
That
whatsoever. Analogy
of stick handling around, it comes from...
There's somebody at work, and they've drilled it into me, and now I'm embarrassed.
So I'm going to touch on something there for the audience, because this is important to know, because Halifax is an older city. When Cameron talks about the furnace being old and dated and no one wanting to touch it because it didn't meet code, when you buy a house and you have something in that is grandfathered, aka... it was built according to building code back in the 1980s, 1970s, 1960s. It is called grandfathering, which means it doesn't meet today's code, which is up to, I believe, 2015 or 2016 now. You don't have to touch it unless you renovate it. And once you renovate that spot, you have to bring that up to current code. Nobody can go in, no licensed contractor and or plumber, electrician, any tradesman can go in and renovate your space in a system and or piece of your home that is grandfathered, aka does not meet today's code, and work on it and leave it up to yesterday's code. If anyone goes in to renovate your space, they have to bring it up to today's code, and that's why you had to struggle with that furnace, because no one wanted to touch it unless they were able to bring it up to today's code, which made it a much more larger expense, I imagine.
Yeah, it was the oil tank, and I think we had to move like 6 inches or a foot onto the neighbor's property and then go through some registry with land
easements.
An easement, and then you get into the whole. That was just like, okay, we'll get the propane system. Rip the Band-Aid off now while I got the card out.
Okay, all right, so cool. You did the BR.R.R.R, buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and we're at the repeat. So you pulled, after all that work, all that money, you pull $175,000 from the refinance.
Yep.
Okay.
But it's important to note, like, we did put down 20%.
Yep.
That was a lot for us to put down at the time, but it also gave us the ability to have this mortgage product.
Yeah.
As well as the ability to do the $60,000 worth of improvements through the purchase plus improvements. So that 20% were also, that kept our debt down.
Yes, it kept your debt down, but it also allowed you to pull out a lot more money.
Yes.
Because when you think about it this way, viewers or listeners, sorry, we're not viewing anything right now. $550, right, is what you paid?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 110 down payment, that immediately puts you down to 440. Mm-hmm. If you pay down the principal, as you said, for 2 years, that's going to put your mortgage down even lower, which helps the gap between the 650.
652 is the 80% of the
80% of the 815 that you were appraised for, which allows you to pull out even more money.
Exactly, because you can do this exact same strategy if you put 5% down or 10% down. The challenge will be that your mortgage product might not be flexible for you to do so without penalty fees. So maybe you do it at the end of your 5-year
5-year term.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or this is why variable mortgages are also helpful, because you're paying 3 months interest as a penalty to refinance. So if you've bought a property, and this is where I love make your money on the front end of the deal. If you've bought your property as a distressed opportunity, solving somebody's problem, with your flexibility, saying, I'll take this now with flexible conditions, or I'm very decisive, and you can get yourself one of those ones where you made it on the front end. You can pretty quickly go back to the bank, especially in our market where, every 6 months it seems like I'm scratching my head again. You can go back to the bank with having done very little and say, hey, I'll pay the 3 months interest, and, don't quote me on that, but and then pay the penalty and refinance. And now, here's the appraised value of your home. You could have done that with an insured mortgage, and that gap still might be big enough that there's some, cake for you to eat there. Yeah,
there's a few things about that I'm going to dissect. First off, when you talk about what Cameron's talking about with insured mortgages, talking to your mortgage broker or talking to your bank and mortgage specialist when you start going, your plan is to implement this strategy, is really key, because they have to build the mortgage to support this strategy and this play when you go to refinance. Because as Cameron said, with the variable rate, that's only a 3-month penalty, whereas if it was a fixed rate, because you want to lock in at today's lowest rates ever in the history of the world, you could lock in that 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, whatever the banks are handing out now. But if you lock in it fixed, you have to wait for your 5-year term to come up for the refinance portion of this. So you could be landlocked into your home and trying to implement an investment strategy for 5 years, and that is not how BR.R.R.R is supposed to be implemented. It is supposed to be implemented as a way to scale your real estate portfolio quickly. Another thing I'll mention about that, what Cameron's brought on, is the 5%, 10%, that window of refinancing and getting your money out. It will be larger based on the down payment you put in, but that's also why you need to watch your renovations and your comps, your comparables of the homes that have sold in your neighborhood that are of recent condition, size, bedroom, bathroom, and location. So watch those comps, get the renovations in correctly, and that way the bank can give you the best refinance possible to pull as much money out. Right?
Yep, bang on.
Okay, so you get $175,000. There are no capital gains on that because it's not for sale.
I just want to quickly touch on the comps bit, because it's something that I've struggled with in the BR.R.R.R strategy, because you're trying to do something in a scaled rate.
Yeah.
And quickly, but you're also holding for the long term. So you want to make sure that you're cognizant of where the comps are, but you also don't want to set yourself up to just meet what today is going to be and then have to do it, every 3 or 5 years and have that go. And people, we could debate this back and forth, but my strategy was that we've got a lot of people here moving from other markets.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of these sort of condos being built and people are gravitating to some higher end finishes. So if you're going to put some effort in now, do that now, because you'll also increase the value
of the neighborhood
and for the refi.
Yeah.
So you're going to refi. If you can put a little bit more in without going crazy, you can actually access that capital again, while also setting yourself up to not just be, doing renovations around the clock every 3 or 4 years to sort of keep up, because you've just been doing the bare minimum to keep it sort of nice to rent in.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna dive in that a little more then. So when you look at the comps, you yourself as an investor, you're gauging the market and what the comps say, and you're trying to gauge what the interest will be. So you're putting in finishes that are better than the comps.
That match the comps, but not necessarily the comps of what I think Halifax would have considered sort of your traditional rental unit for the past decade.
I get it now.
I'm going more for, here's these apartment buildings that are coming up, here's what the new builds are looking like,
Okay.
These Instagram accounts, because it might be a little bit more cash outlay up front, but when you refi it, you'll also get the value and the uplift on that.
So when you're looking at comps, if you're looking at the houses sold, those comps, right? Let's be honest. If there's a new development around the corner compared to the development, because they're the ones who are going to put in the brand new finishes, whether it's a condominium, single family development, and real estate development, whatever it is, look at those comps, because they're going to tell you where the market's going, because when you do a development, they typically push the market threshold in terms of finishes and cost a little higher.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I think the countertops is a really good debate that brings this into to clarity, is like most rentals, or a lot of rentals, you see a lot of people lean towards laminate countertops.
Yep.
I'm going with quartz countertops because of the durability.
Yes.
I know they're going to last. I know I'm not going to have to redo them in 3 or 4 years when somebody's put a hot pot on it and melted it, or there's water damage. But also because when we refinance it, the banks are going to like it. It's a big indication of what the rest of the finished quality is.
Yep.
And for me, I think the difference between the two of them was $1,800 between the quartz and the laminate.
That'll pay for itself.
So exactly. I'll get it back on the refinance. And
you get it back in the rents.
And you get it back in the rents. It does pull in, higher rents.
I love it.
Listen, but it's about being decisive, right? Like when an opportunity is there, if the numbers work, take it, because if you're always thinking about what that next one's going to be, a bird in hand is better than 2 in the bush. I think that's something like that. But if you're always chasing that next one, if the market continues to rise, it's going to become more and more out of hand. And if you do this fast enough and you scale, like buy that one and buy the next one, and then buy the next one after that too. Yeah,
because by what you're saying with the terms of the raising of the market is that I can only imagine when did you buy your second unit?
June 2020.
June 2020. That's already appreciated how much in equity in the Halifax market, given the raise and gains in the market?
I'll let you know in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Are you doing the refi?
We're gonna see what it's at.
Okay.
We'll see what makes sense.
So you haven't pulled money from this one yet?
No.
Okay. So you buy it, you get it again, you start the renovation process. How have renovations been on this project?
Renovations on this project have been fun. This was a bigger one than we took on the last time, and that's more in the sense of last time we had IKEA doing the kitchen and sort of moving the sink from this side wall to that wall, and another crew doing the bathroom, and I got Wackies did the floor, and so we had all these different crews in that were able to get things done relatively efficiently. In this one here, we went with somebody who was doing sort of this was a bigger project for them and their crew, but also tough market. Everybody's doing renovations to find good work in. So it took us a little bit longer than we would have liked on this one here, but we were going sort of one kitchen at a time, bathroom, etc. And sort of I learned a lot through that process. I had to go that way because I've got a day job, but I think I learned a lot going through that process in my evenings and weekends and seeing some opportunity there. Really big opportunity on the project management side.
What opportunity did you see?
On time, on budget. It's sort of something that I don't know if maybe I'm just unlucky. The first time worked out really, really well. the second time here, you know, it's not like we were pulling any walls down and that, but it just is a little bit slower with a new crew and learning to manage them. And active management is very important. You know, when you show up to work, you know, what's the hit list that we need to do today? You know, what are our milestones and how much, you know, labor do we need to put into this task, or do we have budgeted for it? How do I strategically do my project plans so that way I'm, you know, as efficient as possible in getting the units ready, because every month that's missed is missed revenue on the rental side.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, making sure that you're really laying out a project plan that's detailed, so that way you can coordinate the labor. And that was where I found that was a big opportunity in working with that industry, that I outsourced the project management. But I think on the next one, it's something that I'm definitely going to bring in-house, because going over budget and over time is, you know, cost at the end of the day. And that's where a deal will really fall apart, is if you're not in control of your costs. Now this one, not to say this one fell apart by any stretch, but it did show that, you know, when you take on 2 kitchens and 2 bathrooms and sort of a lot of paint, there's a lot more that can arise.
Now, when it comes to any investment property, vacancy and holding costs will always burn you. That's why getting the deal at the front end, as you say, when you purchase it, is so key, because depending on renovations delaying or renovations not being up to snuff or whatever it is on the renovation side, it's going to slow down your rental capacity, and renovations also hold up your refinance capacity, which holds up your acquisition which holds up your acquisitions, which only funds the portfolio more. So how did you lose time on the second BR.R.R.R? Are you behind of where you like to be?
I would say it's more on the active management and just being very clear about a project plan, and when sort of scope changes or a plan changes, just being very explicit around, you know, here's how much time we have to do this. Because if you sort of let subcontractors go, then they'll go, and you know, a 2-hour job all of a sudden becomes a 4-hour job. And that's where, you know, it really just comes down to how much time did I budget for this? Yeah. And being sharp on that. And minimizing rework. People don't realize it, but, you know, not having your quality standards defined at the outset, you know, you have to do a job a second time. Well, I don't really want to pay to do a job a second time.
Yeah, of course. No one does.
And so that's where, for me, it was a bit of a frustrating one. And I think that's where your questions are coming from, as you've sort of heard over the past.
I've heard, and I'm digging.
I'm like, I see how this can go. This is, I work in the cannabis industry and manufacturing, and these are things that we would just runs like clockwork for a manufacturing operation. But I'm not seeing that same clockwork go in sort of the this industry. And I think that it's a breakdown of a lot of subcontractors coming. You really need to be very sharp about your coordination, your communication, and your plan. Okay.
I will tell you why I'm doubling down on this, because I have heard this off the air. It's for twofold. First off, because when it comes to renovations, most first-time investors are very terrified of tackling these things, and it's good to know because they're afraid of getting burned by this exact situation, because holding costs will bury you. And the other reason why is because you're successful and you've gone through it, and you're coming out the other end now with the renovations finishing. So you're still going to pull a big refi. Now the market is doing what the market's doing, which only helps the refi. But even so, even with these problems that you've managed, you and your fiance have managed and found solutions for, you're coming out the other end, which I assume in a much better place.
Yeah, we're really lucky that we both have our full-time day jobs to sort of help take some of that pressure off. But, you know, at the same time, you want to be able to know these things early and have your thumb on them, because if you need to make scope concessions, or if this came up, totally fair. Sometimes you don't know everything until you sort of started going at it. There's unknown unknowns. But you need to be apprised of those the moment that they do become known, so that way you can say, okay, well, we only have X amount of budget left on this, and so, you know, maybe we'll skimp on this, or we won't do that to be able to allocate these funds here, and you can prioritize. And to me, that's just core project management. Yep. And I just found myself having to do sort of a little bit more of that than sort of I thought, but or having to pull those conversations a lot more than I thought, and saying, okay, looks like we're projecting here to go a little bit over time. What's the impact on our budget? And then you sit down, you go through an exercise, and you start to learn a little bit more. And so for me, I just found that was more of a pulling exercise than I would have liked it to be pushed to me.
Track your numbers, folks. please track your numbers. They're going to tell you everything about your investment property.
Yep. And at the same time too, like trust is a massive thing. I got a lot of trust for these folks. They're good people who are doing hard work.
Yep.
But at the same time, like, know your numbers. They're your numbers. It's your investment at the end of the day.
Yep.
You need to know these things as an investor, so that way you can stay on top of it. Because at the end of the day, if the cash is coming out of your account,
please don't go bankrupt.
Yeah. But it really underscores the importance of like we've been talking about on the front end of the deal. If you're really, really tight and you don't have room for some of those contingencies, it does make the opportunity look a little different on the back end. But the nice thing about B.R.R.R.R is it's not a flip.
Yes.
So you are setting it up to make rentals, and hopefully you're still able to command the rentals.
Yeah. Now, okay, I'm going to touch on the rentals in a second, but I want to finish this second B.R.R.R.R you got going on. Okay, you're finishing up the renovations. How many units do you have rented?
Both.
Okay, great. Both units are rented. You're going to the refi soon. How much did you pay for this, and what are you hoping to get on the refi?
We paid $505.
Okay.
Which was that was a really cool negotiation ask, and I'll go into it because I think it's something that not everybody thinks about, and then I'll give you the rest of the numbers.
Yeah.
So the asking price was, I think, $575.
Okay.
Motivated seller, needed to close in 2 weeks. Was international. COVID was sort of in the heat of its moment here, and lots of pressures. We got in there. I think we made an initial offer of $505. We ended up having an accepted offer of $525.
Okay.
And when we went in, we realized that the two furnaces and forced air, both that were in the basement, there's 2 bedrooms in the basement, and that those were both shot and uninsurable. And so we're kind of going through now. We learned from the first one.
Yeah.
We called insurance, and then we said, you got to pull these out, got to redo the whole heating system. That's going to be a massive cost. Well, for us, we saw it as an opportunity as well to sort of
negotiate down. But also, when we pulled out the furnaces and the forced air, we were able to open the ceilings up in the basement and make that living space actually feel like a living space instead of 2 sort of small bedrooms that were jammed into the basement. Amazing.
Which basically meant now we can actually rent to a family that has multiple kids and wants separate space, and there's a school nearby, versus beforehand it was actually rented as a boarding house.
Okay.
So
you were able to flip the use as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So you took the furnace out, use the furnace and forced air problems to negotiate down to 505 from 525. Took possession. What's the potential refi you're looking for?
I'm hoping somewhere around, the 850 mark.
Love it.
To 900 mark.
How much do you want to pull out?
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
You want to try and pull out everything.
No hesitation.
Do you know where you're going next?
We're in discussions. There's a couple different routes. I think the duplex market here is, everybody seems to be looking for them, and the stories I'm hearing sounds like it's not a fun battle. So I'm looking at markets outside of Halifax now.
Yeah.
The Kentville, Wolfville area.
Yeah.
We explored Truro together.
Yeah.
Bridgewater. I'm sort of getting a lay of the land there on sort of the multi-unit residentials.
Okay.
But I think deep down, sort of, I see this as, it's one transaction. If you're buying a property or you're buying a building, I'd kind of like to explore buying bigger and going for those apartment buildings in the 20 plus units.
Love it.
Because for me, it's like I said, we do this side of desk. So having the processes and the systems set up, regimented and automated wherever possible has been, really a big discipline of ours.
Yep.
Which means that we're actually set up really well to be able to scale up our operation.
Yep.
So something like 20 units, I find, with the right processes and systems in place, you can actually manage that pretty easily. Now, I wouldn't be able to do the property management on sort of the side, but I would look to bring somebody in to help me with that. And with something of that scale, the math on that equation works out a lot better than if I'm, adding 2 more duplexes and then wondering, okay, how many hours do I have in my evenings and weekends, right?
Yeah. No, I get it, because when you get to that 20 unit mark, you become a full-time professional real estate investor.
Yeah, and you've crossed that threshold of scalability where outsourcing something is not as big of a hit as it would be right now, where I just don't have the scale to be able to leverage an economy of scale there. Yeah,
because it's really simple. You bring in way more net with a 20 unit than you do a 2 unit.
Yeah.
Especially with the price points, right? Because if you go to a 20 unit in a Kentville, a Wolfville, a Truro, or a Bridgewater, a 20 unit is a different price than a 20 unit in Halifax. Completely different threshold. But as we've discovered through our travels, rents are not far. They're not far off the mark of
They're
Halifax.
starting to knock on the door. There's some interesting sort of economic plays I still need to get my head around with the regions, but I'm so gripped by it. Like everything you've been sharing about Kentville and Wolfville, like I'm fascinated and seeing how this Halifax bubble extends to all those other communities.
We can go down. I can arrange a trip down. That's not a
Sounds
problem.
good.
Going back to BR.R.R.R though, there's probably a few people who are thinking about BR.R.R ing. I believe that BR.R.R is the only strategy right now in Halifax that you can implement successfully as a first-time investor, just because of the gains in the market will support your refinance and your ability to pull out. Actually, no, flipping as well. Flipping will work as well. Shout out to Nika because she's done magnificently on her first flip and she's currently on her second. So that works as well. I like BR.R.R because you keep the property.
Yeah, that for me is the big thing. Like you put all this time and effort into building a cash flowing business.
Yeah.
That's not easy. Like people are trying to do that every single day. And so once you've got that, the idea of just selling that off to me is a bit unsettling, but I always had a bit of
okay.
in me.
I'm gonna actually bring on the refinance part again because refinancing is a double-edged sword that we didn't talk about. We talked about the good side where you can pull out, hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can immediately pump into the next property. When you refinance, though, you refinance with a new mortgage. So when you pulled the first refinance off and you got 815, when you refinanced, you had to sign the new mortgage at 815, correct?
This was actually part of the mortgage product. So it's a revolving facility within, so we didn't have to go for 5 years. It wasn't a true refinance.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So your mortgage didn't go up.
No.
Oh. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize that was the thing.
Pretty sure. No, yeah.
You're pretty sure?
No, because you also see it as a whole other like account. It's like a line of credit that's secured against that asset. It's within the same.
Okay.
I don't know what you call it, the same package.
Yep.
But there's a mortgage value and then there's a line of credit value.
Amazing. Oh, okay. So your mortgage payments didn't go up, which meant that you didn't have to raise rents.
I think there's some other ways, and like I'm not a mortgage specialist here, but
no,
I
of
think
course,
there's some ways that you can do it where you actually would do it into a whole other mortgage again.
Yeah.
And I think you get lower rates in there. And the other benefit is that you're actually paying principal down when you do it as sort of a true refinance. When you're on the HELOC, you're really just doing it as interest only payments.
Yep.
Which is something that you really need to be cognizant of when you're doing this scale, is you're actually borrowing the down payment and you're paying an interest on that. So that's another cost that you need to add into your monthly carrying cost equation for each property, is, what's the financing cost on that down payment that you use. So it's risky. There's a lot of leverage, but I think, we're in a unique position with our market here in Halifax. And
because the gains are so quick.
And at, my life, I don't have any kids or anything right now. So I think there's a little bit of flexibility to leverage as well.
Now, I know you wanted to touch on this before we get out of here. So do you have any advice for anyone wanting to become a real estate investor?
House hack.
House hack?
I think when you start to feel what the difference is like when, you got a rent check hitting your bank account, or Airbnb just like seamlessly transfers in, that cash windfall is really nice. And I think if you're diligent and disciplined about saving that, you can see the snowball roll. And I like sort of rentals because it is a passive income.
Yep.
And it's something that I think if you've got some flexibility in life as well, if you're, buying your first home, I'd encourage you to ask, can you think a little bit more outside of the box of what you might, have originally imagined, and say, is there an opportunity that exists out there where I could house hack? Maybe there's a basement that's sort of semi-finished that you wouldn't use in your day-to-day, but would be perfect to convert to an in-law suite or a one-bedroom. Those are the sorts of things where you can, happy accident, find yourself into a BR.R.R like us.
Yep.
With really, at the end of the day, my quality of life didn't change whether I lived in that entire house myself or just one floor. And I think it's just something that, I'd encourage people to think a little more on that.
It's really interesting with house hacking because another reason you can think about even finding the basement or the second or the unfinished, attic or something, and creating that space. Another thing with the reason, the Halifax market recently approving the secondary in-law suites. If you have space in your backyard, you can put something up and rent it out as well. That will help you decrease your mortgage. There's purchase plus improvements that helps out your mortgage as well. There's so many strategies, just being able to have an open conversation with your mortgage broker or your bank and saying, we'd like to do this. what products can you help us with or build into our mortgage that gives us flexibility so that we can house hack, so that we can pay down our mortgage, or we can just help the cost, because, you know, that is a great way to give yourself momentum to start the process of whether it's BRRRRing, buying, holding, flipping, whatever strategy you want to implement on your real estate investment portfolio, understanding that you need capital, and understanding that keeping costs low and keeping that high is only going to help you scale quicker to that point where, how much passive income do you have coming in right now, if you don't mind me asking?
About 12 grand coming in monthly off of long-term leases.
That's wild.
And we Airbnb out our basement on, so we haven't even really talked about it, but we actually bought a second property off that first HELOC, which is sort of our dream home, if you will. And we have a basement unit that we Airbnb out of that. And I think, you know, that'll bring in about $3,000 to $4,000 on a month on average, sort of blended across the year based off of the bookings we've seen come in these last 2 weeks.
Okay, there's a lot to unpackage there.
Yeah,
so
I'm a house hacking addict. my friends tease me that I don't rent out the shed, and then I say, well, you know what, the new bylaws in the backyard, maybe the shed could become a really nice tiny
we can
home.
Put up a tiny house, my man. I know a tiny house guy.
Exactly.
Okay, there's a lot going on there. So when you pulled up the 175, you didn't just buy one property, you bought two.
Yep. So we went and we did the second BRRRR with the 25, and then with the rest, while we were looking for a BRRRR, we found sort of this other one. And when we were talking to the bank, we said, you know, how can we get maybe creative and set it up in such a way where we could buy both of these? And so we have an insured mortgage product on our sort of the house on the lake, and we moved into there, which made us eligible for that. That was a no-brainer, and it was sort of, we weren't in that original BRRRR for 5 years, and that's why I say I wasn't really a BRRRR to start off with, but it kind of became one. Yeah, was when we learned about the refinance part, and we moved out and started renting it out. Okay, so you bought a house on the lake. I already know it was your dream home and you had to have it. That's why you pushed the bank to figure it out. You decide to Airbnb the basement out. Why? It's your dream house. You live in it. Why do you want strangers in your house during COVID? Because it's still, we're still in the scale up phase and trying to build up the portfolio, so that way, you know, we can have a little bit more freedoms and flexibility later on. Yeah. So we have some flexibility in our life right now, and I'm fine to sort of make those concessions. I don't need to share the beach every single day. I can work around other people if they're willing to, you know, pay my mortgage, and that's really what it comes down to is freeing capital. Yeah, just being flexible in our life and saying, hey, you know, I can go sit on, you know, the other side of the property today. Yeah. And just drag your chair across the lawn. Yeah, I mean, we did a tremendous amount of Facebook marketplacing in December and picking things up in the truck and running here, there, and everywhere to make it all happen. But you know, shout out to Avery and the Airbnbs there for really inspiring some of that thinking. But I think, you know, for us, it was we loved house hacking and saw that as a way to do so, and had talked to enough people who had done it that it didn't really scare us anymore. And I think that's the other big piece of advice. Like I'm just starting out here in my real estate and investing career, if you will. Side hustle is more what I would call it, relative to a lot of people in the industry. But just talk to people. Like I think I reached out to you cold on Instagram. It was nice. Like, I love your podcast. You're like, you're my first DM fan. Yeah. And proud. And but you know, I ended up similarly being connected to Avery and hearing his Airbnb bit. You're like, okay, that's an idea I haven't riffed on yet. And then you can really get into the weeds and take from every one of those what you can and put it all together, and hopefully you can have a cash flowing property. And you also met with Tyler. Yeah, I met with Tyler as well from your podcast. Yeah, Tyler, because Tyler is a huge inspiration to us all. Yeah, he's the one that's sort of pushing that thinking a little bit more. When I was hearing his story, I was like, oh, it's still one building, you know, one mortgage. Yeah, you know, let's see. Yeah, I know I said this already, but before we go, how has, because you've done BRRRR, you've done house hacking. You've just jumped into Airbnb of your basement rental. How's Airbnb looking for you so far? Incredible. So we made the mistake of going with like 2-day bookings right off the bat, and we filled up with some scattered ones. Yep. We thought it was something that would be nice. Everybody would appreciate, you know, being able to only book 2 days instead of having to do 3. But the amount of requests for quarantine stays, yeah, And I think we're booking in the winter here about 1,800 a quarantine stay and about 2,200 in the summer. But the pricing is sort of dynamic. You can let Airbnb change that. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So with your Airbnb as well, you're now seeing the quarantine effect of self-isolation because Nova Scotia is very strict about its self-isolation policy. You're now seeing that bump up in your Airbnb because people are wanting to stay in your basement for 2 weeks at a time, which then gives you $1,800 every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
How far out are you booked?
Right now,
yeah,
we still have some availability. We just launched about 2 weeks ago, but I think we've got 5 2-week stays booked already out until August.
5 2 weeks
just
stay.
booked a 2-week stay in August.
And that's going to be how much net?
22 and change
for 2 weeks of just hanging out.
And we furnished the entire unit off of Facebook Marketplace for under $2,000 and Walmart.
Cameron, I love it.
Yeah. So it's find ways that you can house hack and drive some costs down, and solving other people's problems with the flexibility you have in your life. Like, people were moving out, they needed to get rid of couches today. Well, okay, I'll cancel my plans and I'll show up and get these nice couches off your hands.
I love it. Cameron, man, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward to learning more from all the other guests on your podcast. Really appreciate all the sort of insights that you're giving to everybody through this platform. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye. If you'd like to get in touch with Cam or Kaileigh to continue the discussion on B.R.R.R.R, Airbnb, or real estate investing, they can be reached at hinasproperties@gmail.com or hinas_properties on Instagram. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can reach me at 902-220-7357 or jason.paul@kw.com. Thanks again. Bye.